He came to Los Angeles with nothing but a suitcase, a dream, and a countdown to deportation. She had everything: money, status, and a name that echoed in the business world. What happens when their worlds collide? A billionaire woman, a desperate immigrant, and a love story that defied borders and laws. You won't believe how this ends. Before we dive into this unbelievable true story, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our next twists, betrayals, and jaw-dropping love stories. Hi, I'm Elena Monroe, 35, self-made billionaire based in Los Angeles. My life was all business until I met him. This is Mateo, 26, an immigrant from El Salvador, days away from being deported. He was hired to work on one of my construction projects. What I didn't expect was to fall for him. The Los Angeles sun burned high, painting the city in a golden haze. Dust swirled around the construction site, where cranes groaned and hammers pounded. Elena Monroe stood at the edge of the chaos, her sleek black blazer a stark contrast to the gritty world around her. At 35, she was a name that carried weight: billionaire, real estate mogul, the woman who turned crumbling lots into glass towers. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her green eyes scanned the site with a predator's focus. This was her empire, and nothing escaped her notice. Except him. Mateo Vargas was just another worker. Or so she thought. He was hauling steel beams, his tanned arms straining under the weight, sweat soaking his faded gray t-shirt. His dark curls fell over his forehead, and there was a quiet intensity in the way he moved. Like he carried the weight of the world, not just metal. Elena's gaze lingered too long. She caught herself and turned away, her heels clicking on the pavement as she headed toward her site manager. "Everything on schedule, Tom?" she asked, her voice sharp, all business. Tom nodded, flipping through his clipboard. "Ahead of schedule, Ms. Monroe. Crew's working hard. That new guy, Mateo? He's a machine." Her eyes flicked back to Mateo, now wiping his brow with the back of his hand. A machine. Sure. But there was something else, something raw, unguarded. She shook it off. Good. Keep it that way. She was halfway to her Bentley when it happened. A shout tore through the air, sharp and panicked. Elena spun around. A stack of steel beams had slipped from a crane's grip, swinging wildly toward the crew. Workers scattered, yelling, but Mateo, he didn't run. He grabbed a younger worker, a kid barely out of high school, and shoved him out of the way. The beams crashed to the ground, missing them by inches. Dust exploded, choking the air. Elena's heart pounded. She didn't think. She ran toward the chaos, her heels sinking into the dirt. "Is everyone okay?" she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. Mateo was on his knees, helping the kid up. His eyes met hers for the first time, and it hit her like a shockwave. Brown eyes, deep and steady, like they held secrets she'd never unravel. "We're fine," he said, his voice low, accented, calm despite the near disaster. She nodded, catching her breath. You saved him." He shrugged, standing, brushing dirt off his jeans. Just did what anyone would. But it wasn't what anyone would do. She saw it in the way the other workers looked at him. Respect, maybe awe. Elena forced herself to turn away, to walk back to her car. She was Elena Monroe. She didn't get rattled. She didn't stare at random workers. She didn't feel her pulse race like this. That night, in her glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city, Elena couldn't focus. Her laptop sat open, spreadsheets forgotten. She poured a glass of red wine, the liquid catching the light like blood. Mateo's face kept creeping into her mind, those eyes, that quiet strength. She laughed at herself, bitter. Get a grip, Elena. He's just a guy. But he wasn't. She knew it even then. The next day, she was back at the site. She told herself it was to check progress, but her eyes searched for him. There he was, hauling lumber, his movements precise, almost graceful. She approached Tom, casual as she could manage. "That guy, Mateo. What's his story?" Tom shrugged. "Good worker. From El Salvador, I think. Keeps to himself." "Why?" "No reason," she lied, turning away. But she couldn't stop watching. When Mateo took a break, sitting on a crate with a water bottle, she found herself walking over. Her heart was loud in her chest, but her voice was steady. "You're good out here," she said. He looked up, surprised, then gave a small smile. "Thanks. Just doing my job." "I'm Elena," she said, then cursed herself. He probably knew who she was. Everyone did. "Mateo," he said, standing, wiping his hand on his jeans before offering it. His grip was firm, warm. She held on a second too long. "You're not like the others," she said, then winced. It sounded stupid, but he didn't laugh. "Maybe," he said, his smile fading. "But I'm just trying to get by, like everyone." There it was again. That weight in his eyes, like he was running from something. Or toward it. She wanted to ask, to dig deeper, but a shout from the crew broke the moment. He nodded, polite, and went back to work. Elena walked away, her mind racing. This was dangerous. She was his boss, technically. She was Elena Monroe, untouchable, unbreakable. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, his hands, his gaze, the way he'd risked his life without a second thought. That night, she dreamed of him. They were standing in the middle of the construction site, the city silent around them. He reached for her and she didn't pull away. When she woke, her heart was pounding, her sheets tangled. She stared at the ceiling, the truth sinking in like a stone. She was falling for him. And that was a problem. Because Elena Monroe didn't just fall. She built empires, not scandals. She controlled everything. Her business, her image, her heart. But Mateo? He was a crack in her perfect world, a spark in a dry field. And she knew, even then, that sparks like that could burn everything down. She didn't know his secrets yet. She didn't know he was living on borrowed time. That every day he worked was a day closer to losing everything. She didn't know that loving him would cost her more than she could imagine. But she would. Soon. The Los Angeles skyline glittered like a promise. But inside Elena Monroe's penthouse, the air felt heavy. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of whiskey in her hand, the ice clinking softly. Her mind wasn't on the city below, or the multi-million-dollar deals waiting on her desk. It was on Mateo Vargas, his voice, his hands, the way he'd looked at her on the construction site. She'd gone back twice that week, telling herself it was business. But every time, her eyes found him, and her heart did things it hadn't in years. She wasn't a fool. She knew this was trouble. Mateo was a worker, an immigrant, someone worlds apart from her polished life. Yet when she closed her eyes, she saw him, saving that kid, shaking her hand, his quiet strength pulling her in like gravity. Elena set the glass down hard, the sound sharp in the silence. "Enough," she muttered. She wasn't some lovesick girl. She was a billionaire, untouchable. But the ache in her chest didn't care about her bank account. The next morning, she was back at the site. The air smelled of sawdust and metal, and the crew buzzed with energy. Elena wore her usual armor, tailored blazer, heels, her face a mask of control. She was there to review blueprints, she told herself. But when she saw Mateo lifting a stack of plywood, her resolve cracked. He noticed her, gave a small nod, and something in her snapped. "Mateo," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. He set the wood down, wiping his hands on his jeans, and walked over. Up close, she noticed the faint scar above his eyebrow, the way his jaw tightened like he was bracing for something. "Ms. Monroe," he said, polite but guarded. "Everything okay?" She hesitated. This was her chance to walk away, to keep it professional. Instead, she said, "Take a break. Walk with me." He blinked, surprised, but followed. They moved away from the noise, toward a quiet corner of the lot where a half-built wall cast a sliver of shade. Elena leaned against the concrete, her arms crossed. "You're good at this," she said, nodding toward the site. "Why construction?" Mateo shrugged, his eyes on the ground. "It's honest work. Pays the bills." She tilted her head, studying him. "There's more to it. I can tell." He met her gaze, and for a moment she thought he'd brush her off. But then he sighed, like he was letting go of something heavy. "Back home, in El Salvador, I wanted to be an engineer. Build things, you know? But things happened. Had to leave. This is what I got now." Her chest tightened. "What happened?" He looked away, his voice low. "Bad stuff. Gangs. My family, they're gone. I came here for a new start, but it's not that simple. Elena's breath caught. She'd expected a story, not a confession. You're undocumented, she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Mateo's eyes darkened and he took a step back. I shouldn't have said anything. Forget it. He turned to leave, but she grabbed his arm, her fingers firm on his sleeve. Wait, she said, her voice urgent. I'm not judging you. I want to understand. He stopped, looking at her hand, then her face. Why? I'm nobody to you. The word stung, but she didn't let go. You're not nobody. Her voice was softer now, almost a whisper. Not to me. The air between them crackled, like a storm about to break. Mateo's expression softened, but there was fear there too. You don't get it, Ms. Monroe. I got a clock on me. Immigration's looking. I could be gone any day. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Deportation. The word was a knife, cutting through the haze of her feelings. She should walk away. This was too messy, too risky. But standing there, his arm warm under her hand, she couldn't. How long, she asked. Weeks, maybe less, he said, his voice raw. I'm out of options. Elena's mind raced. She'd built an empire by solving problems, buying, selling, negotiating. This was just another problem, right? But it wasn't. This was Mateo. And the thought of him being torn away made her feel like she was falling. Then we find options, she said, her voice fierce. I can help. He shook his head, stepping back, her hand falling away. You can't fix this. People like you don't get it. I'm not worth the trouble. Stop it, she snapped, her eyes blazing. Don't tell me what I can or can't do. I'm not losing you. The words hung between them, raw and unguarded. Mateo stared at her, his breath uneven. Why do you care? He asked, almost pleading. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because saying it out loud, I'm falling for you, would make it real, and real was dangerous. Instead, she said, meet me tonight. My office. We'll figure this out. He hesitated, then nodded. Okay. As he walked back to the crew, Elena's knees felt weak. She just crossed the line, and there was no going back. That night, she waited in her office, the city sparkling beyond the glass. When Mateo arrived, he looked out of place in his worn jacket, but his presence filled the room. They sat across from each other, a desk between them, but it felt like nothing at all. I have lawyers, she said, her voice steady. Resources. We can fight this. Mateo's jaw tightened. It's not that easy. If they catch me, it's over. Then we make sure they don't, she said, leaning forward. I'm not letting you go. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something break in him. Hope, maybe, or something deeper. You're crazy, he said, but there was a ghost of a smile. Maybe, she said, her own smile flickering. But I'm not wrong. As he left, promising to meet again, Elena felt the weight of what she'd done. She was risking everything. Her reputation, her empire, her heart. But for Mateo, it felt worth it. She didn't know yet that his past held more than he'd told her. She didn't know that helping him would pull her into a world of lies and danger. But she would. And when she did, it would change everything. The fluorescent lights of Elena Monroe's office buzzed softly, casting sharp shadows across the sleek mahogany desk. Outside, Los Angeles sparkled, a city of dreams and deals, but inside, the air was thick with tension. Elena sat, her fingers drumming on a manila folder, her green eyes locked on Mateo Vargas. He stood across from her, hands shoved in the pockets of his worn jacket, his dark curls catching the light. The clock on the wall ticked like a heartbeat, each second pulling him closer to deportation. Elena had spent the last 3 days digging. Her lawyers, the best in the city, had laid it out plain. Mateo's visa had expired and immigration was closing in. His only shot was a long shot. Marriage to a U.S. citizen, a green card application, and a convincing act for the authorities. It was risky, messy, and not guaranteed. But Elena wasn't one to back down from a fight. Not when it was for him. Sit, she said, her voice calm but firm, pointing to the leather chair opposite her. Mateo hesitated, then sat, his jaw tight. You said you had a plan. What is it? She leaned forward, her hands clasped. There's a way to keep you here. But it's not simple. His brow furrowed. Nothing about this is simple. Just tell me. Elena took a breath, the words heavy on her tongue. Marry me. The room went still. Mateo's eyes widened, and for a moment he didn't move, didn't breathe. Then he laughed, short and sharp, like he thought it was a joke. What? I'm serious, she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. A marriage on paper. It's your best chance at a green card. My lawyers can handle the paperwork, the interviews. We make it look real and you stay. Mateo leaned back, running a hand through his hair. You're crazy. You don't even know me. I know enough, she shot back, her eyes blazing. I know you're worth saving. He shook his head, standing, pacing like a caged animal. This isn't a game, Elena. You're a billionaire. I'm nobody. If this goes wrong, you lose everything. Your reputation, your business. Why would you do this? She stood too, rounding the desk, closing the distance between them. Because I can't let you go. Her voice cracked, betraying the emotion she tried to bury. I don't know why, Mateo, but you're in my head, my dreams. I'm not walking away. He stopped pacing, his brown eyes searching hers. You're risking too much. For what? For you, she said, the words raw, unguarded. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him. Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me and I'll stop. He didn't speak. His breath was uneven, his gaze locked on hers. The air between them hummed, electric, like the moment before a lightning strike. Then, slowly, he reached out, his fingers brushing her arm. It was barely a touch, but it sent fire through her veins. I feel it, he whispered, his voice rough. But it's dangerous. I know, she said, her heart pounding. But I'm not afraid. They stood there, inches apart, the world outside forgotten. Then he pulled back, his hand falling away. Okay, he said, his voice low. If you're sure, I'll do it. Elena nodded, her throat tight. Good. We start tomorrow. My lawyers will prep us, documents, interviews, everything. We have to be perfect. He gave a small, bitter smile. Perfect. Right. The next week was a blur. They met daily, learning each other's lives like actors memorizing lines. Favorite foods, childhood stories, little habits. Elena learned Mateo loved soccer, hated olives, had a scar on his knee from falling off a bike at 10. He learned she drank coffee black, worked late every night, and secretly loved old jazz records. They laughed, sometimes the tension easing as they shared pieces of themselves. But every touch, every glance blurred the line between fake and real. One night, in her penthouse, they practiced for the immigration interview. Papers were spread across her glass dining table, and a bottle of wine sat half empty. Mateo leaned back, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a playful grin on his face. Okay, what's my favorite color? Elena smirked, swirling her glass. Blue. Easy. He raised an eyebrow. And yours? Green, she said, then paused. Wait, you didn't know that? He laughed, the sound warm, filling the room. I do now. She looked at him, her smile fading. He was so close, his arm brushing hers, his eyes soft in the dim light. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers grazing his. He didn't pull away. For a moment, they just sat there, hands touching, the weight of what they were doing sinking in. This feels real, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mateo's expression shifted, something raw flickering in his eyes. It's supposed to, right? She nodded, but her heart screamed it was more. She wanted to kiss him, to close the gap, but the folder of legal papers on the table was a cold reminder. This was a deal, a plan. Not love, not yet. As he left that night, he paused at the door. Thank you, Elena, for everything. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go. When the door closed, she sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. She was falling hard, and every step made it harder to pretend this was just business. The marriage was fake, but her feelings weren't. And that scared her more than any immigration agent ever could. She didn't know yet that Mateo was hiding something, a past that could unravel everything. She didn't know that the interviews would test more than their story, but she would. and when the truth came out, it would shake her world to its core. The air in the immigration office was stale, heavy with the weight of 1,000 desperate hopes and shattered dreams. Elena Monroe sat ramrod straight in a stiff chair, her tailored navy dress pristine, her hands clasped to hide the tremor. Beside her, Mateo Vargas shifted, his tie slightly crooked, his jaw clenched like he was bracing for a punch. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the clock on the wall ticked like a bomb. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. They'd spent weeks preparing, memorizing every detail of their love story. Elena's penthouse had become a war room, littered with coffee cups and legal briefs. They'd practiced answers until their voices were hoarse. How did you meet? When did you fall in love? What's his morning routine? Her favorite meal? They'd laughed, argued, even cried once when the pressure got too much. But now, in this gray room with its peeling paint, none of that felt like enough. The immigration officer, a middle-aged man with a buzz cut and a face like stone, sat across from them. His badge read Agent Carter, and his eyes were sharp, cutting through their carefully crafted facade. He flipped through their file, the silence stretching until Elena's nerves screamed. "Ms. Monroe," Carter said, his voice flat. "You're a busy woman. Billionaire, right? Why'd you fall for him?" He glanced at Mateo, the word dripping with skepticism. Elena's heart lurched, but she kept her face smooth, her voice steady. "Love doesn't care about bank accounts, Agent Carter. Mateo's kind, brave. He saved a kid's life at my construction site. That's who he is." Carter's eyes narrowed. "Convenient timing, though. He's facing deportation, and suddenly you're in love." Mateo tensed, his hand brushing hers under the table, a signal to stay calm. "It wasn't planned," he said, his accent soft but firm. "I didn't expect her. She's everything I never thought I'd have." Elena's chest tightened. His words sounded so real, so raw. She almost believed them. Almost. She forced a smile, squeezing his hand. "We're building a life together. That's what matters." Carter leaned back, unconvinced. "Let's test that. Mr. Vargas, what's her favorite breakfast?" "Scrambled eggs, no salt, with black coffee," Mateo said without hesitation. "She eats at her desk, always working." Elena's lips twitched. Perfect. They drilled this. Carter didn't blink. "Ms. Monroe, what's his favorite song?" Volver by Vicente Fernandez," she said, her voice steady. "He hums it when he's stressed." Mateo's eyes flicked to her, a flash of surprise. She wasn't supposed to notice that, but she did. She noticed everything about him. The questions came faster, sharper, like bullets. "Where do you sleep? Who does the dishes? What's the last gift you gave each other?" They answered in sync, their voices weaving a story that felt more real with every word. But Carter's face stayed hard, and when he stood, Elena's stomach dropped. "Separate rooms," he said, his tone final. "We're not done." The door shut behind him, leaving them alone. Elena let out a shaky breath, turning to Mateo. "We're okay," she whispered. "We've got this." He nodded, but his eyes were dark, haunted. "He's not buying it. I can feel it." She grabbed his hand, her grip fierce. "Then we make him." "We're not losing, Mateo." Before he could answer, the door opened. A second officer led Mateo out, and Elena was alone. The room felt colder, smaller. When Carter returned, he sat closer, his voice low, like a predator circling. "Ms. Monroe," he said, "you're risking a lot. Fraud's a serious crime. You sure he's worth it?" Her blood boiled, but she kept her cool. "I love him. That's all you need to know." Carter smirked, leaning back. "We'll see." In the other room, Mateo faced his own interrogation. The officer, a woman with a tight bun, fired questions like darts. "When did you propose? Where? Why her?" Mateo's answers were steady, but his palms were slick with sweat. He pictured Elena, her fierce eyes, her stubborn heart, and clung to that. "I proposed at her penthouse," he said. "Candlelight, just us. I chose her because she sees me. Not my papers, not my past. Me." The officer's pen scratched the paper, her face unreadable. "We'll check your story. If it doesn't match, you're on a bus back to El Salvador." His throat tightened, but he nodded. "It'll match." Hours later, they were reunited in the waiting area. Elena's hair was slightly mussed, her lipstick faded. But to Mateo, she looked like a warrior. She grabbed his hand, pulling him close. "You okay?" she whispered. "Yeah," he lied, his heart still racing. "You?" She nodded, but her eyes were stormy. "They're digging. We need to be ready." As they left, the weight of the day pressed down. In the car, Elena drove, her knuckles white on the wheel. Mateo stared out the window, the city blurring past. "If this goes wrong," he said quietly, "you walk away. Promise me." She slammed on the brakes, the car jerking to a stop at a red light. "No," she snapped, turning to him. "I'm in this. All the way." His eyes softened, and for a moment, he let himself believe her. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're too good for me," he murmured. Her breath hitched, and she leaned into his touch just for a second. "Don't say that." The light turned green, and she drove on, but the moment lingered, heavy and unspoken. They were playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were higher than ever. Elena felt it, the pull of something real, something worth fighting for. But doubt gnawed at her. Was he acting? Was she? She didn't know yet that Mateo's past was a shadow waiting to strike. She didn't know that Carter had already found a thread to pull, a secret that could unravel their story. But she would, and when it hit, it would test everything she thought she knew about love. The Los Angeles night was alive with neon and noise, but inside Elena Monroe's penthouse, the silence was deafening. She stood by the window, arms crossed, her reflection sharp against the glass. Mateo sat on the couch, his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. The immigration interview was behind them, but the weight of it lingered like a bruise. They'd passed barely. Agent Carter had let them go with a warning, "We're watching." But tonight wasn't about immigration. It was about something deeper, something that had been simmering since the start. Elena turned, her voice tight. "You've been off, Mateo. Distant. What's going on?" He didn't look up. "Nothing. Just tired." She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "Don't lie to me. We're in this together, remember?" His jaw tightened, and when he finally met her eyes, there was a storm in his. "Together? You think it's that easy? You don't get it, Elena. You'll never get it." Her heart stung, but she held her ground. "Then explain it." "I'm trying." He stood, pacing, his hands raking through his dark curls. "You grew up here, Elena. Money, power, a name people respect. Me, I'm fighting to exist. Every day, I'm reminded I don't belong. The way people look at me, the way they talk, like I'm less because I'm not American enough." She frowned, confused. "You're doing fine. You work hard, you're learning." "Learning," he cut in, his voice sharp. "You think it's just about learning? It's the little things, Elena. The jokes I don't get, the slang I trip over. At the sight, guys laugh when I say something wrong. I smile, but it burns. I'm always playing catch up, trying to fit in a world that doesn't want me." Elena's chest tightened. She'd seen him laugh with the crew, charm them with his quiet strength. She hadn't noticed the strain. "I didn't know," she said softly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you wouldn't understand," he snapped, then caught himself, his voice dropping. "You can't. You walk into a room and people listen. I walk in and they see an accent, a problem. I'm not just fighting immigration. I'm fighting to feel human here." She stepped closer, reaching for him, but he pulled back. "Mateo, I'm on your side. I'm doing everything I can." "For what?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "To save me? Or to prove you can?" The words hit like a slap. She froze, her breath catching. "That's not fair. I love you." He looked away, his shoulders sagging. "Maybe, but love doesn't fix everything." The room felt smaller, the air too thick to breathe. Elena's mind raced. She'd thought their fake marriage was turning real, that their late-night talks, their shared glances, meant they were building something. But now she saw the gap between them, her privilege, his struggle, a cultural chasm she hadn't even noticed. She wanted to fix it, to pull him close, but before she could speak, her phone buzzed on the table. She ignored it, but Mateo's eyes flicked to the screen. "Answer it," he said, his voice flat. It can wait, she said, but the buzzing didn't stop. She grabbed the phone, annoyed, and saw her lawyer's name. What? She answered, sharper than she meant. Elena, we've got a problem, her lawyer said, his voice urgent. Immigration's digging deeper. They found something on Mateo. A record from El Salvador. You need to see this. Her stomach dropped. What kind of record? Mateo's head snapped up, his face paling. Hang up, he said, his voice low, almost a growl. She ignored him, her pulse racing. Tell me, she said into the phone. It's a police report, the lawyer said. From 5 years ago. Mateo was linked to a gang. Nothing proven, but it's enough to flag him as a risk. If this gets out, the marriage won't save him. And Elena, your name's tied to this now. The press will eat it alive. The phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. Elena stared at Mateo, her heart pounding. A gang, she whispered, her voice breaking. You were in a gang? No, he said, stepping toward her, his hands raised. It's not what you think. I was a kid, Elena. I got caught up with bad people. I didn't have a choice. You didn't tell me, she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. You let me risk everything. My business, my life, and you didn't tell me this? I was going to, he said, his voice desperate. But I knew you'd look at me like you're looking now. Like I'm a criminal. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. I trusted you. I loved you. Was any of it real, Mateo? Or was I just your ticket to stay? His face crumpled, and for a moment, she thought he'd break. It was real, he said, his voice raw. Every second. But I'm not what you think I am. I'm not good enough for you. The words cut deeper than anything else. She wanted to scream, to throw something, but all she could do was stand there, her world cracking. Get out, she whispered. Elena. Get out, she yelled, her voice shattering. He grabbed his jacket, his eyes wet, and walked to the door. I'm sorry, he said, then he was gone. Elena sank to the floor, her sobs echoing in the empty penthouse. She'd given him everything, her heart, her trust, her future. And now, she didn't know if any of it was real. The man she loved was a stranger, and the cultural walls between them felt like a prison. She didn't know yet that Mateo's secret was only the beginning. She didn't know that the truth would force her to face a choice she couldn't imagine. But it was coming, and it would change everything. The Los Angeles dawn broke in hues of pink and gold, but Elena Monroe barely noticed. She stood on the balcony of her penthouse, the city sprawling below like a chessboard where she'd always been the queen. Now, she felt like a pawn, caught in a game she couldn't control. Her hands gripped the railing, the cold metal biting her palms. Mateo's confession echoed in her mind, his past with MS-13, the lies he'd spun to protect her. It hurt, sharp and deep, but worse was the truth she couldn't shake. She still loved him. The past week had been a blur of chaos. Agent Carter had called, his voice smug over the phone. We're reviewing your case, Ms. Monroe. Don't leave town. Her lawyers were scrambling, but the news was grim. Immigration had dug up Mateo's history, records tying him to the gang, enough to paint him as a criminal, not a victim. The marriage, their carefully crafted story, was unraveling. And then there was the press. A tabloid had caught wind of their engagement, splashing Elena's face across headlines. Billionaire's scandalous love affair with undocumented worker. Her board was furious, her investors nervous. Her empire was teetering. She'd avoided Mateo since that night, needing space to think. But every moment without him felt like drowning. She saw him everywhere, in the coffee she drank black, in the jazz records she played late at night. She was Elena Monroe, unbreakable, unstoppable. So why did this choice, walk away or fight for him, feel like it could break her? Her phone buzzed on the glass table behind her. A text from her lawyer. Asterisk Carter's team found something new. Call me now. Asterisk her stomach dropped. She dialed, her voice steady despite the panic clawing her chest. Elena, her lawyer, Rachel, said, her tone grim. They've got a witness. Someone from El Salvador claims Mateo wasn't just a low-level runner. Says he was involved in a murder, a rival gang member years ago. Carter's pushing for deportation and charges. Elena's knees buckled. She sank into a chair, the phone trembling in her hand. "That's not possible," she said, her voice hoarse. "He was a kid. He told me." "I know what he told you," Rachel cut in. "But this witness is credible. If you keep going with this, Elena, you're not just risking fraud charges. You're tying yourself to someone who could be labeled a killer. Your company, your name, it's over."